reading through this from verse 1 through verse 35. And then we'll go back through and just kind of try to summarize the things covered here. Proverbs chapter 6, beginning with verse 1, says, My son, if thou be surety for thy friend, if thou hast stricken thy hand with a stranger, thou art snared with the words of thy mouth, thou art taken with the words of thy mouth. Do this now, my son, and deliver thyself when thou art come into the hand of thy friend. Go humble thyself and make sure of thy friend. Give not sleep to thine eyes, nor slumber to thine eyelids. Deliver thyself as a roe from the hand of the hunter, and as a bird from the hand of the fowler. Go to the ant, thou sluggard, consider her ways, and be wise, which having no guide, overseer, or ruler, provideth her meat in the summer, and gathereth her food in the harvest. How long wilt thou sleep, O sluggard? When wilt thou rise out of thy sleep? Yet a little sleep, a little slumber, a little folding of the hands to sleep, so shall thy poverty come as one that travaileth, and thy want as an armed man. A naughty person, a wicked man, walketh with a froward mouth. He winketh with his eyes, he speaketh with his feet, he teacheth with his fingers. Frowardness is in his heart, he deviseth mischief continually, he soweth discord. Therefore shall his calamity come suddenly. Suddenly shall he be broken without remedy. These 6 things doth the Lord hate, yea, 7 are an abomination unto him. A proud look, a lying tongue, and hands that shed innocent blood. A heart that deviseth wicked imaginations, feet that are swift in running to mischief. A false witness that speaketh lies, and he that soweth discord among the brethren. My son, keep thy father's commandment, and forsake not the law of thy mother. Bind them continually upon thine heart, and tie them about thy neck. When thou goest, it shall lead thee. When thou sleepest, it shall keep thee. And when thou wakest, it shall talk with thee. For the commandment is a lamp, and the law is light, and reproofs of instruction are the way of life. To keep thee from the evil woman, from the flattery of the tongue of a strange woman. Lust not after her beauty in thine heart, neither let her take thee with her eyelids. For by means of a whorish woman a man is brought to a piece of bread, and the adulteress will hunt for the precious life. Can a man take fire in his bosom, and his clothes not be burned? Can one go upon hot coals, and his feet not be burned? So he that goeth into his neighbor's wife, whosoever toucheth her, shall not be innocent. Men do not despise a thief, if he steal to satisfy his soul when he is hungry. But if he be found, he shall restore 7-fold. He shall give all the substance of his house. But whoso committeth adultery with a woman lacketh understanding. He that doeth it destroyeth his own soul. A wound and dishonor shall he get, and his reproach shall not be wiped away. For jealousy is the rage of a man, wherefore he will not spare in the day of vengeance. He will not regard any ransom, neither will he rest content, though thou givest many gifts. Now this seems like a collection of different thoughts. And as we go through here, we want to see and pull together these various teachings that are given here. Now in verses 1 through 5, he's talking about, well, one of the things he mentions here, if thou be surety for thy friend. That means you're standing good for someone else's debt. You're co-signing a loan, is basically what it's talking about. It says, don't do it. The scriptures, here we have some advice, some financial advice, and in which the bottom line is we are to be financially responsible and independent, to stay free, if possible, of indebtedness. And there's an old saying, and with its foundation, I believe, in Scripture, neither a borrower nor a lender be. If we would be financially free and independent, then this is good advice for us. And so he's saying, if when we talk about striking the hand, and you're taking it in the words of your mouth, in other words, you have promised, you have made a vow to stand by this person, to stand good on their loan. Should they default on it, then you're saying, well, you'll be good for it. So he says, you're taken with your own words. You're caught in a snare, is how he describes it here. And he said to his son, he said, now son, if you've done that, he said, you go and you do whatever you need to do. You humble yourself to your friend, whatever. But try to get yourself out of that situation. Don't get into that. Don't co-sign, if you will, for somebody else. I know people that have. We know people back in Washington that co-signed for their loan for their son. Their son defaulted on the loan. They lost their house. He said, don't do it. It's a warning here, and some good advice to stay out of debt and these financial obligations that bring you into bondage. And if you will, was it Romans 13:8? He says, owe no man anything except to love him. The only debt that we should owe to anyone is that debt to love, which is the fulfilling of the law, because that's the chapter where Paul gets into that love is the fulfilling of the law. And so, if we would fulfill the spirit of the law, we should love our neighbor as ourselves, and that is the only debt that we should owe to anyone. Verses 6 through 11 is some advice here concerning idleness. He says, go to the ant, thou sluggard. A sluggard is a lazy person. Someone's kind of slow to motivate, to get started. Lazy. And so he's saying here, you need to go and observe the ant. And so here is a lesson from nature, that God has created this marvelous little creature, the ant, and as an example to us, and that we could observe the ant and learn from this creature. And the things that he points out here in particular, says, which having no guile, overseer or ruler, provided her meat in the summer and gathered her food in the harvest. In other words, the ant, the best way is someone, the lesson here is to be self-motivated, self-disciplined. Sometimes we use the phrase a self-starter, self-motivated. That you do not need someone to stand over you all the time and tell you what you need to do. See, if that's what it takes, then you're kind of falling into the category here of the sluggard. The lesson, and most of these things, everybody has a different personality and temperament. we look at people, look at birth order, look at different things and personality traits. And there are some people that we refer to as a type A personality. Now, they're a self-motivated, self-starter, the go-getter. They're a workaholic type. That's kind of the type A personality. I tell you right now, that's not my type. That's not my personality. Then there are different types of personalities. Some are, more laid back, easygoing, and so on. The thing is, regardless of that, we can learn. We can discipline ourselves. The person like myself that is more the laid back, easygoing type of person, we have to work harder at it. We have to think about it, concentrate on it, and try to develop those habits that will help us to be more independent, working alone, working without supervision, that sort of thing, and still get the things done that need to be done. And so that's what he's advising us here. The main thing is that they don't have a guide, they don't have an overseer, they don't have a ruler, yet they are very industrious creatures. You ever watched them and all? And maybe that's, I don't know if it's because of the scripture here and the admonition to watch them, the reason people create those little ant farms where they can watch them. You have that little thing sitting on your desk or on the dresser at home, and the sand and the ants in there, and they're just working and everything so that you can observe them and how they do. Of course, when they're in the ground, you can't really observe what they're doing, but those things allows you to observe them. But they go out and they get their food and they bring it back in, they store it up and so on. And this is particularly true as the setting here, and even in America up to a point in which this was more of an agrarian society. I keep using that phrase, coming back to that idea. There was a time when we were a more agrarian society. That is, we lived off the land. We produced those things ourselves that we ate and consumed. And as such, there was more of this cycle of, a time to sow, a time to cultivate, then a time to reap, a harvest time, and to store up for the winter, and so on, and that gets you through until the next harvest, and so on. And that is kind of the example here. And as we tie this thought to the previous one about financial stability and to avoid certain bad habits, if you will, financially, is that they stored up. They knew how to save ahead for a rainy day. That's what the ant did. And so there is a lesson here also in this about saving. So idleness brings poverty, but industry, that is being busy, brings prosperity. That is kind of the lesson from the ant that we're taught here. Then beginning in verse 12, he talks about a naughty person and a wicked man. And that which follows, I've kind of titled it The Naughty Seven. Because the things he describes here, a naughty person, a wicked man, walketh with a froward mouth, he winketh with his eyes, he speaketh with his feet, he teacheth with his fingers, frowardness is in his heart, he deviseth mischief continually, he soweth discord. Therefore shall his calamity come suddenly. Suddenly shall he be broken off without remedy. These 6 things doth the Lord hate. Yea, 7 are an abomination unto him. And he goes over this, the same 7 things that he just mentioned. These are characteristic of what he calls the naughty person, the wicked man. These 7 things. And 7 is the number of completeness. I believe as we look at these things, we may see the totality of the depravity of man in all of his faculties being depraved here, as he talks about these things. And it mentions his countenance, his tongue, his hands, his heart, his feet, his witness, and the fruits of his life, if you will. And so we see the totality of the individual mentioned here, and it refers to it as naughty, wicked, and an abomination. And so as he mentions and he lists these 7 things, and the first of all is pride. The proud look, a haughty spirit, this obviously that the Lord hates. Pride, and how many times it's mentioned, this I believe was the original sin. Satan's heart was lifted up in pride. This is what caused his fall and ultimately the fall of man. And as we read the other day, he said, "Hear of your father the devil, and the lusts of your father ye will do." Now, it doesn't mention all this in that portion of Scripture. It talks about he was a murderer. It talks about he was a liar. Those things are mentioned here. But Satan's original sin is that of pride. And it is the first of the things listed here. And we see all through Scripture man being pointed out to him, his pride and the consequences of pride. And so it talks about pride. A lying tongue. Thou shalt not lie. All liars have their part in the lake of fire. Again, it's talking about the very first sin perhaps that we commit, that we are born liars. We're born lying. As soon as we be born, speaking lies. The shedding of innocent blood. They talk about the hands that shed innocent blood. The heart that deviseth wicked imaginations. The thoughts and intents of the heart was only evil continually. As the heart is deceitful above all things and desperately wicked. Who can know it? Feet swift to run to mischief. You know, our way, there's a way that seemeth right unto man, but the end thereof are the ways of death. All man's ways are right in his own eyes. And as we do that, we go to our own way and we do that which is right in our own eyes, but it tends to mischief. And usually we use the term mischief, but it's misbehavior. All kinds of misbehavior. Behavior that's not appropriate. Mischief. Sometimes we use that as somebody being mischievous. Not so much as a compliment, but not in its evil context. We think of boys as just being full of mischief. Well, yes, they are. But that's because of the sin nature. You know, they think of ways, they devise ways to misbehave. That's that sin nature. Feet swift to run to mischief. A false witness. So lying and a false witness, isn't that the same thing? Not exactly. We lie or do not tell the truth about a lot of things. But in particular, when it's talking about bearing false witness, it's like giving false testimony against someone. Accusing someone of doing something they didn't do. You know, we can lie about a lot of things. We can lie and say, well, I didn't do that when we did. That's lying. But when we accuse someone else of doing it, that's bearing false witness. And that it's a form of lying. They're both wrong, but we see it is given its own category here, listed separately. And this is what in the Ten Commandments, thou shalt not bear false witness. And then finally, he who sows discord among the brethren. The sowing of discord, the results, the fruits of our behavior, the fruits of our words and actions. James chapter 3. Verse 13 says, who is a wise man and endued with knowledge among you? Let him show out of a good conversation his works with meekness of wisdom. But if you have bitter envy and strife in your hearts, glory not and lie not against the truth. This wisdom descendeth not from above, but is earthly, sensual, devilish. For where envy and strife is, there is confusion and every evil work. But the wisdom that is from above is first pure, then peaceable, gentle, and easy to be entreated, full of mercy and good fruits, without partiality, without hypocrisy. And the fruit of righteousness is sown in peace of them that make peace. And so we see here that God desires of us to be peaceful, to be peacemakers. The one who sows discord is creating strife, is gendering strife. And it usually comes out of envy and jealousy, he mentions here. Those things are associated with pride. And so, when, we have pride, therefore we envy, we become jealous. When we're envious and jealous of someone else, we will seek ways to bring that person down, make them look bad. And in doing that, we wind up sowing discord. When we tell tales, when we spread rumors, when we gossip, when we do these things, we're sowing discord. We're creating strife. And that is serious. Remember, this is listed amongst these 7 things that God says he hates, and it's an abomination in his sight. And the word abomination is one of the strongest terms in the Bible. These 7 things doth the Lord hate. Or these 6 things doth the Lord hate. Yea, 7 are an abomination unto him. And the last of these is he that soweth discord. And so that is the opposite of sowing peace. That is the opposite of how pleasant and how good it is for brethren to dwell together in unity. So these 7 things here, call them the naughty 7, as he describes the naughty person and the wicked man. And then that's about half of the chapter. And then the other half, the rest of the chapter, verses 20 through 35, deals with the subject of adultery. Verse 20 through 24, he is saying, here's the purpose of the instruction. He said, listen and hear. He said, keep thy father's commandment. Forsake not the law of thy mother. Bind them continually upon thy heart, and tie them about thy neck. When thou goest, it shall lead thee. When thou sleepest, it shall keep thee. When thou wakest, it shall talk with thee. For the commandment is a lamp, and the law is light, and reproofs of instruction are the way of life. He said these things, these instructions, and not just the ones already talked about here, but he seems to be particularly concerned. And while this is written from the standpoint of the father to his son and warning him against the adulterous woman. This was a patriarchal society. Remember that it was such that the legal standing, the woman was without legal standing except where she was protected by the law. But she was under authority to her father, and that authority passed from the father to her husband when she marries. And so she is bound by the law, and she's under authority. And so these things are written from that standpoint. But though it speaks here of the woman seducing the man, there are times in our society and so on when it's the other way around and the man seeks to seduce the woman, even in some of the biblical examples that we run across. And so this applies equally to both genders here, the idea of adultery, but it is written by a father to his son primarily. But just kind of keep that in mind as he's warning here of the pitfalls in life. And he says the instructions, the reproofs of instructions are the way of life. This is how not only we ought to live, but these are the things that preserves our life. By remembering these things, doing these things, they will preserve you. They will keep you from harm. And that which he describes here describes the harm that comes from committing adultery. And it goes on, and he warns here and said, now, don't be seduced, don't be enticed. Remember, we sin and we are tempted when we're drawn away of our own lusts and enticed. And so, there's an old saying, it takes two to tango. It takes two. And so whether we're talking from the standpoint of men and women, we all have that depraved nature, that lustful nature, and there are enticements. And so this can apply to either. And so we need to keep ourselves and beware of the enticements, because we have that sin nature within us that is easily enticed and led astray. And so we need to be on guard. We need to watch that. And so women can be easily enticed just as men can be enticed. And so he's warning here to be on guard and not allow yourself to be enticed and not to lust after the other person. And it says, just like you can't take fire and hug it up to yourself and your clothes not get burned. I started saying, well, try it sometime and see. No, don't try it. Common sense tells you if you take live coals, burning coals, and you embrace them, clothes aren't going to be the only thing that gets burned. You're going to get burned. And they talk about walking on hot coals. It says you're going to burn your feet. And he says, and so is he that goeth into his neighbor's wife. He said, whoso toucheth her shall not be innocent. And he makes a comparison here. And it's not saying that one sin is okay, whereas another is not, but he's making a comparison as to how people deal with different kinds of offenses, how people react to them. And he says, men do not despise a thief if he steals to satisfy his soul when he is hungry. So if a man steals bread because he's hungry, if he's caught, he says, according to the law, he'll make restitution. He said, but people don't despise him for it. He said, but you commit adultery, and they will despise you for it, because there's no need. He says, the one who commits adultery, said, lacketh understanding. The person that does it destroys his own soul. He says, a wound and dishonor shall he get. Now, like he says, it goes back to that. Let's go back to that thought. That if you steal because you're hungry to get something to eat, it is wrong and you will be punished. So, but men won't despise you. You won't carry this dishonorable thing the rest of your life. You make restitution and go on. But he says, a wound and dishonor shall he get, and his reproach shall not be wiped away. Basically, he said, you can't make it right. You steal something, you can make it right. You can make restitution. You commit adultery, you cannot make it right. You cannot go back and undo it. He says, for jealousy is the rage of a man, therefore he will not spare in the day of vengeance. He will not regard any ransom, neither will he rest content, though thou givest many gifts. It goes back, even under the law, restitution was made, and they would pay so many fold. If you took, depending on whether it was an ox or a sheep, pay, you make restitution to make it right. It didn't, under biblical law, crime did not pay. You steal one sheep, you had to pay back 4. Now that's not good odds. That doesn't pay. And the idea was that not only did you take that man's sheep and you restore that one, plus, because he was deprived of the work and the production it could have done in the meantime. You didn't just take the one ox, but you took away the work that ox could do. You took away the production. And so, that's like if you get injured on the job, not only do you get paid for your medical bills, but how about lost wages for the time you was off? If you were in an accident, somebody hits you, and not only do they pay to repair your car, they pay your medical bills, but how about the time you missed work? You were deprived of being able to work and earn a living. And so that's part of the restitution. That's the idea with repaying, fourfold. You steal an ox, well, you have to pay back 4. You're making restitution for time loss, for income loss. And so, but he says, you commit adultery, there's no ransom the husband's going to be willing to take. He's going to, jealousy, he said, it's a rage. And he will not regard any restitution as sufficient. They treated it much different in those days because it was a capital crime. In Jesus' day, they took the woman taken in adultery. That could have been punished. That was the death penalty, stoning. So it was a serious thing. And that's what he's talking about here. So, as we look at these, he lays down some guidelines for financial ethics. Beware of indebtedness. Be free. Work ethics. Beware of laziness. Be busy. Personal ethics. Beware of naughtiness. be good. Moral ethics, beware of adultery. Be pure. So, if we read this and kind of distill it into these main thoughts and these ideas, that these are words of wisdom and are the way of life. That we would learn these things, learn to apply them. This is practical wisdom to live by on a daily basis. Let us stand together in